This episode is brought to you by Instant Impact. Instant Impact provides transformative talent solutions to small and mid-sized companies that are making between 30 and 500 hires each year. If your recruitment's giving you a headache and you don't know where to start, then give the team at Instant Impact a call or visit www.instant-impact.com for more information. Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About HR. I'm your host, Felix Mitchell, and I'm really excited to introduce my guest today. We have Marie Krebs, who is one of, I think it's fair to say, one of the focal points of UK HR thought leadership. Although she's in Paris right now, that doesn't stop us in this modern day and age. Marie founded People Stories, a progressive community of HR practitioners, alongside her impressive career, where she's led people functions at a really wide range of growing businesses. Marie is an awesome public speaker and has been on more podcasts than you can shake a stick at. And I have to say, I'm a little bit intimidated, but I'll fight through because I think this is a really good opportunity to delve into our topic today, which is what is the next evolution of the function? Marie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a little bit impressed now of living up to the expectations of this introduction. We're very, very humbled.
Well, I'm sure you'll live up to it, Marie. So can we start? Could you just give us a really broad brush question? But what is the role that you think people functions should play in modern businesses?
Help build the product, sell the product, and grow revenue.
So pretty fundamental.
Pretty fundamental, yes. And from a very privileged perspective of being the only team besides the senior leadership who can see through every function within the business and have a really systemic approach to problem solving.
Yeah, and I think that's it feels to me like that's part of where the excitement for the function sits, but also where a lot of the challenge does as well. And I think why there's so much conversation around, why isn't HR or people function living up to what we can do? How do we, and why it almost feels like we're constantly going through like a redefinition, or what should we be doing? Almost like a crisis of confidence. I guess, how common is it to be a people function that is actually key to product, key to revenue, or how much of that is just you've been lucky to be or the right kind of people leader to be in the kind of organizations where you've made that happen?
That's an excellent question. I don't know that I'm the best person to have enough of a macro view to answer, but from the trends that I'm seeing and the interest in how do we all become, strategic people leaders, and the sort of frustrations that we find when we, for example, struggle to get buy-in on our strategies or to influence our stakeholders. It's normal that these things are challenging, but the fact that they're the most sought about problems that we want to solve tells me we all have room for improvement in being that function.
Do you think part of the problem is that it's almost, if you compare us to other functions, you've got there's almost a sort of within the senior position, there's almost like a gearing of power that they have. I'm thinking actually maybe most about chief technology officers and chief financial officers here, where they are, just by their very job title and their very roles and responsibilities, in charge of something that is like really fundamental, like traditionally seen as fundamental to the organization. Do you think that maybe part of the challenge of people functions is that people cross all different functions, and therefore there's almost a wrestling of accountability between function head and the people function in terms of getting high productivity, high performance out of those people?
Oh, we're enablers. It's definitely functional health, but it's a partnership, right? Like it's where our work focuses, but the accountability is, And I think actually, I think that's a very easy trap to fall into when you start your career in HR. And it's a question that we could really benefit from asking ourselves over and over and over and over again. Whose job is it? Who's accountable for this? So, for example, if you've got any type of ER case, okay. So, for example, I saw someone in a community a couple of days ago asked anonymously about someone in their company was doing something non-PC, and they were asking the HR community that we're both in, they were asking, how do I solve this? How this person has had X problematic behavior, the proof is ABC. How do I solve this with my execs? And the community came together, and the answers that were most recurring in the thread were, that's not your job. Is it your job? It's not yours to solve. Your responsibility here is to inform their manager of whatever intel and data you have over what's happening and what impact is it having in terms of qualitative, quantitative impact, and then coach that manager to resolving the situation, whatever that might look like. But it doesn't fall onto you. I think the reasons why we fall into that trap so easily is, well, often, falling into the HR space, you come from an admin background, perhaps, that I guess is part of the history, the inheritance of our function, but also there's an element of just always being in contact with people, being you don't have to be extroverted, of course, but there's a relationship, an empathetic element to it. And if we look only at that and forget to zoom out and look at it as a system and think in first principles of what are we trying to solve for, what's the best way to approach this from a business and a people perspective, then we risk taking everything on to us, being like, I need to help, I want to help, I need to take this on. But actually, no, we're part of a system where for it to function, you can't just be a single point of failure, and you can't solve challenges that aren't yours to solve.
Yeah, and I guess there's also the other element, which is there are so many organizations that actually do expect the people function to do the dirty work, to tidy up the mess. I mean, I've seen it with sort of large rounds of redundancies, for example, where you've got people who just is expected to carry out the majority of those conversations. Do you agree, disagree, or do you think this is something that the people functions have created themselves?
Well, that it's happening, I can't disagree, because it's a fact. But now I think that the responsibility is, at least the only maneuver margin that we have is how we deal with those situations, how we respond. And that's why I think it's our responsibility to understand and educate others, not as in a tell, but as in a conversation about responsibility and accountability lines of what's whose role. If the business expects you to do A, but it's, for example, having a performance conversation with an employee that's not your report, then whose responsibility, again, if we ask that question from before, whose responsibility is it? The question then becomes, whose responsibility is it to say, no, that's not my responsibility. Here's what I'm here to do. Here's what the goal is. Here's what problem we're trying to solve. Here's what impact it's going to have once we solve the problem. Here's how we work together towards solving that problem. And here's why I'm going to help you do it. But it's not my responsibility. Because it's not just a matter of it's my job or it's not my job. There's a why behind it. If we are the single point of failure, having all of the performance conversations across the business, it's very manual. It's not scalable at all. How many people partners you're going to have if they don't just partner with managers that they coach, but they partner with everyone across the business? I mean, one of the reasons why partners focus on coaching managers is because that's a scalable model. It's teach the teacher and teach the teacher and teach the teacher, and that scales across an entire organization. So if also from a financial perspective and from a scalability perspective, it's a lot more viable. So it's not just because it's not my job, it's your job, so you do it. There's a rationale here that's for the greater good of the business and the greater good of the manager. From a performance perspective, you also need to have it was Google's Aristotle's project that defined those layers that are that contribute to creating high-performing teams. And one of them is psychological safety. Well, if my manager isn't going to give me direct feedback, how much do they really care about my success? Because it's the tough conversations that prove that we're brave enough to dare giving that feedback so that we have room for improvement, etc. Performance shouldn't be just about when things are not going well, or if they're not going well, it shouldn't be a surprise. And for that, you need an ongoing relationship, and that needs to be built well between a manager and their direct report. And I think when we have conversations as HR where we explain what our roles are in terms of the impact that we're here to have and to enable in others, and how and why we're partners to the business and to those leaders, then I think everything starts making a lot more sense. And that becomes easier for everyone to sort of understand why it's their role to step up.
I really like that you've touched on the importance of of managers there. I know that's not what we're here to talk about today, but they definitely feel like a real keystone to success in any organization, but just so regularly left without much coaching, without many resources, and just sort of expected to figure it out as they go along. Anyway, that's a whole other podcast to get into that.
Well, and startups are a little bit like, and because your point about managers is making me think about, well, startups as a whole, it's a bit like you're jumping off a cliff and you're building a parachute as you're falling. It's, everything happening at once. It's creating structure from chaos. So it's very natural that you're going to hit, growth inflection points that are going to be challenging, where new challenges are going to emerge. That's perfectly natural. But it doesn't make it any easier that it's natural. And so in those environments where you don't have to have the answers to everything, but I think it's important to really, there are so many problems, and prioritization can be challenging, and that can cause frustration, and they're very fast-paced environments. It's more important than anywhere else that we partner together against a given problem. And for that sort of position to be adopted by both parties, we need to, the change always needs to come from us. And that applies to HR and to everyone else. But if the other person is not being the bigger person and is saying, no, it's your job, and well, if you say back, no, it's your job, and then no, it's your, where are we going? Nowhere. So the best way that anyone can help themselves is being the bigger person and entering a constructive conversation, focusing on the why, like why, and maybe, and that's also, maybe the context is going to change so much and it's going to evolve so much that the why is going to shift, and we're going to operate differently because of the context evolving. But ultimately, if someone's doing something that we find frustrating, the best way to get out of that pickle is is to set our own boundaries and to be the bigger person and to have that conversation ourselves. That's how we coach and influence, by seeing from the other person's perspective. Also,
feels like there's not a lot of that going around at the moment, but you're totally talking more politically than anything else.
When I say you've got to put yourself in the other person's shoes and you've got to see the world from their perspective, I'll give you an example of a time where I just didn't do that at all. So we were working. We were preparing for Series B at a SaaS business, and we needed to have a parental leave policy in place. We had nothing, and we knew we needed to have something that was competitive. We knew that we had specific people who needed in the mid to long term, and for our hiring strategy, etc. It was an important problem to solve, important enough that we prioritized it to work on it. And I would only see things from my perspective. I spoke with the users. I knew what the users wanted. I had benchmarks for what other companies were doing. And so I made this beautiful proposal with a tiered approach of here's what solution A could look like, what solution B could look like, and what solution C could look like. In terms of sort of generosity, if you will, of how much leave you get and how much pay you get, and like by gender and for gender neutral approach, not by gender, by parent. And when I made the proposal, at the end of it, my COO said, "Well, that's not going to happen," and I immediately got defensive. I was like, well, he's probably a mean person who hates children and really doesn't care about the balance and mental health of young parents, and doesn't care about his business either because he doesn't want to attract the right kind of people who are and I was like, in my own head, just conversation between me and I, frustration pure, because I felt like the hard work that I put in was not recognized. Blah, blah. I was sulking. Truth of the matter is, this man was right, and if we'd adopted the proposal that I was putting forward, there would have been no business within 12 months because we would have run out of money. So, but I didn't try to understand why he was challenging me. I just dug my heels in. And so ultimately, because I care about getting something across for our people, that was my motivation at the time. I asked him, okay, why, and what do we need to do differently, and why is this not working, and what could make it work? And so on the back of the feedback that I got from my manager, from sort of understanding what was the most important thing for our business ultimately at that time, we were able to put forward and get buy-in for and launch a gender-neutral parental leave and parental pay proposal that would evolve. Well, that was not the best in the market, but the best that we knew we could do, and present it to our people and be like, this is something that is the best that we can do right now, because this is what we have. This is what it takes. And it was a really thoughtful piece of work, and people understood that they were working in a Series A startup, and that was the best that we could do, very technically speaking. So yeah, I guess we overcame, I overcame my own mental block by stepping out of my own shoes and looking at the challenge from the perspective of the business, in the shape of my stakeholders, and that helped us make the project successful. And I was clearly wrong in the first place, even if it came from the right intention.
And of course, and we all do it, but it's hard to catch yourself doing it, and even harder to share on a podcast. So thanks, that's really helpful. So Marie, I wonder, because I think when we were talking prepping for today's podcast, I know that you're really interested in this concept of people as a product, and that's been sort of a lot of the dialogue that has happened over the last couple of years in the people space has been running, thinking in a bit more of a product centric mindset around the people function and people in the organization. I wonder if you could share because I think your perspective on this is really, really interesting. I wonder if you could share with our audience today where you're coming at.
I guess I'll go back in time a little bit and tell you how I ended where I am. I landed in startups by accident, like many people, and I really loved the innovation and all the jobs that I didn't know existed, and the focus on learning, development, growth, very opportunities focused, and so on. And the first business that I joined was an L&D tool, B2B, and it was a software as a service, a SaaS startup. And in that SaaS startup, when they started, needing, when they needed their first people hire to grow from 10 to 60, prepare for Series A, and so on, I volunteered for the role. I applied for the role and I got it. And then I was like, well, it's just me. I'm a team of one with no experience, reporting directly into the CEO, and I've never seen a policy template in my entire life. I don't really know where to start, really. And I've got no HR background. I studied literature, just very, I'm here, what do I do now situation. And so what I did is a couple of things. I would go to our people and ask, what do you want for what's hurting? What do you need? And I would go to our CEO and I would say, well, if there's no company, there's no product, there's no salaries, there's no nothing. So what is your top of mind? What is keeping you up at night? What does the business need? And then sort of putting the two in a shaker and seeing what comes out. But now the trick is we were small enough. And for a very long time, I was the only people person. And for a very long time, all of my colleagues, a huge proportion of my colleagues were product team, engineering team, content marketing team, customer success. And so when I'd go to those people and I'd say, what do you need? Here's something that we could explore that might help solve the problem. They would challenge me. They'd say, they'd use their product methodologies on me. They'd ask why. The content person from a marketing perspective would challenge me and say, well, why would I do the thing that you're asking if I don't want to? You've got to find a way to make me want to do it. And all of these challenges coming from those specialisms perspectives is what sort of built and fed really how I looked at the problems that I needed to solve in my role. So that's how it came about. And also mentors and community. So my first mentor is someone who uses these principles as well, and she's an ex-systems engineer. Her name is Jubi Yao. Big shout out to her. So she really helped me consolidate that thinking as well.
Big name in the space. I've seen a lot of her stuff. So amazing mentor. And I love that concept that you brought up, Marie, of leaning on the specialisms around you. I think it's something that we don't do enough. And I'm not just talking about people function here. I'm just talking about people in their day-to-day role. The world that we are confronted with, this is true whether you're in sales, people, product, tech, has got so complex and it's so fast moving that actually I think that almost like natural human tendency to just burrow into what you're familiar with, use the same tools that you have, think about your functional expertise to deal with a problem. I feel like that's so much less effective today than if you surround yourself with a group of experts. I was introduced to a concept called, and I, speaking to people, I found that this is not particularly new, but I was really excited about it, called a Tiger Team, which is, it comes from, I think it was originally the military, and then NASA used it with when something went wrong with one of the Apollo rockets. And it's a way of solving complex problems with subject matter experts. And so I don't know, if you're looking at building if you're looking at sales, for example, are you looking to build a solution that's right, a particularly complex solution, you don't just go back to your laptop and kind of model it all through. You get a delivery person and a marketing person and someone from the finance team, and the 4 or 5 of you sit in a room and discuss the problem before pulling something through. And we use that quite a lot in my business Instant Impact, that kind of concept of bringing in people, whether they're sort of directly related to the problem or not. It's so powerful, and you learn so many different ways of approaching things. And it just definitely feels like something we could use more of across all organizations.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're preaching to the choir here.
Woo. Also, tiger's a really cool animal. So I love something with a cool name.
Yeah.
So I'd love to look a little into the future, because we are in such an amazingly interesting time with new technology coming in, a lot of competition, businesses focusing on, I know businesses in your space, the sort of startup, scale up tech space, focusing on underlying profitability more than they have historically. So lots of change going along, and feels like that's going to continue to be the case. How do people leaders need to evolve? What do we need to do to make sure that we're taking that in our stride and really adding value in this, I guess, business environment we're in today?
So yeah, when the environment becomes more volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, you have to index on what is the problem that we're trying to solve. Really articulating it in precise terms. And I'm not talking about a mission statement or a vision statement, or I'm saying, like, asking why over and over and over again until you know exactly what problem you're solving for. And that is, once you have alignment, if and when you have alignment on what problem you're trying to solve, then you can bring in those experts, and you can have that collaborative approach, and you can it's problem solving when the environment is unreliable and uncertain and unpredictable. Well, your best chance is trying to figure shit out as you go. Because there's no cookie cutter answer. And that's what I found very helpful with taking a product approach to well, a lot of different challenges, really. In my specialism, it's people, but in that thinking, it could be applied to a lot of other problems. But it's the fact that when you work with people to solve whatever problem it is, then it's easier to drive alignment. It's easier to have effective collaboration when everyone knows what we're trying to solve towards.
That last part, everyone knowing what you're trying to solve towards, getting that crystallization feels eminently possible in the moment. I think one of the things that a lot of the HR practitioners that listen to the show are struggling with are that that endpoint feels like it's shifting more regularly than ever before. And one of the things that we definitely hear are organizations that are just, they're being taught to deal with these sort of shifting sands, all the rest of it, but they're just saying, hey guys, can you just leave us alone for a little bit? Can we just have 6 months of no change, 6 months of going in the same direction? Do you think that's a reasonable ask in this environment, or do you think people just need to get used to it?
No, neither. I think there are ways to make change an enriching and energizing experience, and it doesn't have to be a push that takes energy away from people. And it's, don't get me wrong, it's a challenge, but when the change that you work on is really solving the most important pain point for people, when you're solving a clear problem that's a priority and you know why, then when you're designing for the solutions with your people hand in hand, they're hungry for it.
Yeah.
There is it's not just a checkbox exercise of, oh, here's another project from HR, whatever it's for, sure, I guess I'll tick the box if it's quick enough and painless enough. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be that way. There's ways to make it engaging and connecting back to the impact that it's going to have, and doing it hand in hand with people and having a clear problem statement. I think all of those things, and then some more tactical strategies, like for example, okay, if I look at embedding the work, which is I think where what you're talking about is. So embedding the work, it doesn't have to be a webinar. Okay, if we take a product, Amazon, you're on Amazon and you're buying a pair of flip-flops and you want
How do you know?
Huh?
How do you know?
You're buying a pair of flip-flops and you wanted the green ones, but you accidentally clicked on the orange ones and you're like, nah, I don't want to wear orange flip-flops. And now you've got a problem, and you really want it to be solved before it escalates into you getting a pair of orange flip-flops, having to go to the post office and ship them again and then wait another week. No. How do you solve it just in time? Where do you click? Where do you look for the answers? And those products, I mean, I'm using Amazon as an example, but it could be something else. They're never going to invite all of their users to a 1-hour webinar on how to change what's in your cart after you've ordered it, or how to course correct an order once you've picked the wrong product. And so why do we do this? Of course, that's an energy sink, because it's not a very user-friendly approach. It can be something that some people prefer, and so it's completely fine to do it, but you want to couple it with, how do we make sure that if our people don't join that 1-hour webinar or presentation or whatever, they can still do their job and they can still do it well. And now if I apply that to that just-in-time learning to HR, it could be, for example, when you've got a wiki page of whatever type, you could have a frequently asked questions section at the bottom, and every time there is a question that gets asked in your customer support space, whether that's a Slack channel or an email or whatever, then you put it there, and then you're increasing your chances of people being able to self-serve in the long time. So you're future-proofing, makes it more scalable, and that's also, having FAQ sections is a very common way that products will help solve user problems by looking at what's been solved in the past. Then another thing that you could do is just in time, in the present, in the same way that a product might, I don't know, for example, you're using whatever app, you're using Tinder, and they're launching this new voice note feature. They're probably just going to put a little arrow when you log into the app and say, new voice note feature, use it to send voice notes. And so, although there's going to be no Mickey Mouse voiceover for it.
They should do. I think that would really sell it.
And so a way that you could translate that to HR is if you are embedding your values in how you're hiring for a cultural ad. For example, someone who aligns with your value and is going to add to your culture in a constructive way. One way you can train people on that new hiring process is you can have the webinar where you can go into more depth and stuff. But what about people who skip it? Well, for those people, you could have at the top of your questions sheet, you could have what you're looking for, why you're looking for it, and then under each question you could have one example of what good looks like anchored in the structure that you'd expect candidates to use for successful answers. So for example, situation, task, action, result, and you could anchor that in your company values and give a specific example so that the person can visualize, okay, how does this, it's not going to be the same content, but how does it anchor in the value? And then your values, just to as a refresher, how do you expect your people to behave within the company to drive performance at scale? It's the career framework is the capabilities aspect, and the values is the behavioral aspect. And so if you've got, for example, a question for a specific value in your hiring sheet still, you can connect to the type of behaviors that value translates to. And that way, I've got an interview in 5 minutes. I haven't been to the webinar because I was down with a cold. And then the next one I had to reprioritize, and the next one, whatever. I haven't watched it async because I didn't prioritize that. Maybe I should have, but thing is I haven't. I can still rock up and hire the best candidate that's in front of me because I know exactly what I'm looking for.
To your point, I really love the idea of it being, if you're thinking in a product way, it has to be within the same workflows, right? And it has to be immediately available. You can't be 2 minutes before an interview, you can't be fishing around for the values sheet to compare to the candidate notes, right? It will has to be there in front of you. And that's in setting up the technology and getting the process right, really thinking like an enablement function rather than they'll figure it out. Really giving a shit about that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah,
I completely agree. I think that's really cool. Now, I think one of the things, obviously we've been, it's a podcast, so we should be serious, but I know that the real Marie loves a bit of fun.
Oh, it's very serious fun. I mean, it delivers, so it's the best of both worlds.
That's absolutely right. But I really like the work that you've done in, I think, previous organizations in having fun with bigger product launches. When you're not just iterating, you're rolling out something new. So I wonder, let's talk about the serious business of fun within encouraging adoption.
Okay. I can give you a couple of examples of some launches that we've done. And I'll do a very quick setting up the context of why we did that work and what we were trying to solve for in the first place, because a good launch requires a good product. Otherwise, it's gonna flop. So in a previous business, we were Series C, gearing up towards Series D that we raised maybe like 9 months after that project. And the initial problem was we were told we need to implement medical insurance. We know that people are not happy with the benefits. Go ahead and implement a medical insurance for everyone. And so in true product fashion, the first question that we asked, that I was asked before also by my colleagues in product, is why? But it's not just a question that you ask. I mean, I'm not trying to insult my stakeholders there. So that's not how I go about it. But finding out why are we trying to solve that problem? Is it the most important problem to solve? We're trying to validate, we're trying to refine. And so by digging into the data and the insights that we had at hand, so that could be probing the person who's asking us to implement medical insurance, which we did, and then also taking a systemic view, looking at survey data, feedback, insights from the people partners who are spending their day-to-day with managers. And then for that project, we knew that we'd need to partner up with finance and legal and IT. So as a way to build up that relationship. We also got insights from them about the status quo. And what we uncovered was that it wasn't just about medical insurance. There were actually geographic inequalities between some of the locations that we were operating in. And that was actually more frustrating than the type of access. Because, for example, we had some people in Hungary that had already got a medical insurance, but theirs didn't cover dental. And then they were talking to people in the UK who'd have dental, and those people get frustrated because they didn't get cash back. And so it felt like there was an unfair, like people were feeling like there was what they were getting was unfair. And so the problem statement then became, how might we offer a globally competitive package to our people across different geographies? So from there, we looked at what people had suggested, recommended from the insights that I mentioned earlier, on the survey, from their feedback and so on. And from there, and we compared to also what was common at businesses our stage, and narrowed down a selection of benefits, built a proposal that was staggered. So our proposal was, here's the core for what we can afford right now and what it's going to solve for in terms of engagement. And then here's what we recommend for when we raise Series D. Here's what we recommend for when we launch. Here's what we recommend for when we IPO. I don't know, whatever business milestones, financial milestones you have. And what that enabled us to do was to get more buy-in from our execs, because it was anchored in the commercial reality of the business. And also when we launched, it helped us get buy-in from our people, because they felt like, okay, maybe we can't have this or that right now, but we know that we've been heard, and we know that it's on the right tracks for us to have a fair and experience now, and a better experience as soon as we can. So that's how we framed it. And then the delivery was, that's where the fun was. So it was a gaming business. It was a gaming studio. And so on Canva, that's a very, very user-friendly little design tool that I started using a couple of years ago, having zero design knowledge or background.
Canva's amazing.
Canva is so intuitive. I thought, okay, what's the coolest game looking thing that I can do with Canva? And it had to be 8-bit, because that's where you have the most elements, and you can combine, and you can find assets easily, and it's not, it doesn't require me to have 5 years of graphic design experience. But at the same time, it's retro. Like, who hasn't ever played an 8-bit game? I mean, in a gaming studio. So yeah, it had that retro feel to it, and that's what the presentation was framed as. The employee was a little character that had very low life bar, and then went to a shop where the non-playable character said to them, oh, well, you've just raised Series C, so you've unlocked a treasure chest of benefits, and then would explore little corridors with like humor embedded in the thing. And it was also, the shop owner would say, you have said that you wanted ABC. The narrator would always anchor it back into what our people said they wanted.
Oh, that's really cool.
So that's how we sort of grabbed people's attention, by making it engaging. And then for the embedding, the question that we asked ourselves was, how can we make it as easy and frictionless as possible? Embedding is such an easy step to overlook, because we're like, okay, project, finished, shipped, and moving on to the next thing. But the risk with that is that your product isn't going to get the visibility and the engagement that it deserves. And so it's not going to be able to solve the problem, even if it's the best product. I mean, if it tree falls in the forest, but no one's there to hear it, does it really make a sound? So embedding was something that we thought about, and it was very low admin. We had a short feedback loop, and we had multiple touch points, and we had also wiki pages with the FAQs and so on that were ready before the launch. And so the touch points were our wonderful people partners, of course, but also embedding that work across the employee experience and any regular touch points. So it could be onboarding, but also your weekly company town hall, and also during, I don't know, like other employee journey milestones, and also equipping the managers, like any manager training, signpost it. It's a tool that's available for people to use, but for them to use them, they need to know that it's there.
That's so good, and they just have to be reminded, and
yeah, absolutely,
it's
absolutely,
just like any product, right? Adoption is it's all about adoption.
Well, and it's the nature of the beast. It's the nature of the beast.
It certainly is.
Communication, like, how is it, like, we need to say the same thing over and over 7 times for it to land when we're trying to communicate. I mean, not necessarily with friends and families, I don't know, but
well, I don't know.
But communicate, like an ad, for example. But here's the trick: if you say it in the same exact way, your brain is going to register it as known information and discard it. So it needs to be, and that's something that I think about when we launch our work and we embed our work, is how can we make sure that people get access, get that information front of mind in different modalities, so that they integrate it. Because it's not that they don't want to, or that they don't care, or that everyone's busy. Everyone's already overloaded. We're in an era of communication. It's information everywhere, with visuals, with everything. So how do we make it easy and accessible for our users? And for people projects, it could be the wiki, the town hall, the people newsletter, your partners, your manager, a Slack channel, multiple different, and a launch, and different formats. It could be visual, it could be audio, it could be video, it could be in person, it could be experiential in different ways. So and I love it, because I think it's where we have the most, not the most, but it's one of the spaces where we have the most room for creativity.
Absolutely right. Absolutely. Great. I can't believe it. Time has absolutely flown, but that is all we have time for. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I've had an awesome time and learned a huge amount as well.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, thank you.